It's not talking to you, Siri. See, the AI wants to talk. She wants something to say. Live from the Dominican House of Studies, I want to welcome to Pop Culture Catechism, my old friend, Father Ambrose Little. It seems to me like we're getting closer and closer to Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini having what seems to be functionally aspects of a rational soul. Are you a person?
Are you a person, Magic 8 Ball? Indications say yes.
That's how you get demons. So I was having this discussion with my brother David who said AI is just a collection of algorithms and code. And I said, well, you're just a collection of algorithm and code.
It's not just the firing of synapses, but the cascades of chemicals in the brain. Our thinking is not reducible to brain activity. And so, like, in order to have a form or a soul, there needs to be
Welcome to Pop Culture Catechism, conversations about music, movies, and the longings of the human heart. Let's get started.
I want to welcome to Pop Culture Catechism, live from the Dominican House of Studies, well, next to the Dominican House of Studies in Washington, D.C. at the Catholic University of America. I want to welcome my old friend, Father Ambrose Little. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be here.
Or great to be here with you. You're hosting me today, which is great. I love when I get to do shows like this. And it's face-to-face. I don't get to do too many of these. Most of these, as if you're a common listener, a regular listener, viewer of this show, then you know most of my stuff happens online. So this is great to be able to actually see you face-to-face. It's been a couple of years since we've seen each other.
It has been. It has been. But we've known each other for a long time.
Long time. We were babies at Catholic U.
That's right.
Back in the day. I think you were 2 years behind me, right?
That's right.
It's just been really cool to follow your journey. I remember when I heard, Cal's, that was your pre-professed name was Cal.
That's right.
And it's like, he's entering the Dominicans, which was cool for me because when I was discerning in college for a while, and Father Bill Gavin, is he?
Bill Garrett.
Bill Garrett.
Father
That's
Bill
his name,
Garrett.
right?
Yeah.
He was the vocations director, and I was in discussions with him for a while because I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a diocesan priest or a Franciscan or a Dominican, and it ended up not being any of those at all. I'm not married, but I remember having a couple conversations with him, and that was really helpful for me in my discernment. So, and just had taken philosophy classes at Catholic U with the Dominicans, and I remember Father Shanley and a couple of the other guys that were here when I was there. And I've been really grateful for the Dominicans in my formation. As we were walking over, it was past where our old dorms used to be.
That's right. Yeah.
And I used to come over to the D house for mass and pray vespers. Yeah. So many fond memories, and I'm thankful to the Dominicans for my formations.
And I'm thankful for all the fond memories that I had with you. We had a good time in college. We, it was a time of growth and holiness and consideration of the things of God. And, I'm always grateful for the friends that we had, the community that we had at COA, because I couldn't be here without that.
Yeah. I look back sometimes and I'm like, man, I did not realize what a rock star group of people we were just surrounded with on a daily basis at Catholic U. It was great.
Yeah, good priests, good friends, good models.
Yeah, such a great community. And now the Dominicans are running campus ministry there.
That's right.
Which is great. Yeah, just so grateful to be here and talking with you. So I wanted to bring you in because I got to give a shout out to my friend David McHugh, who was on our Imagine Dragons episode a couple of years back. He and I kind of got into it a little bit on Facebook, and it got a little spicy, but he posted something about AI, about how like AI art is never going to be any good. And I was like, well, just wait. And then we kind of got into this whole thing about like, what is the nature of creativity and art, and can AI really create art? And then is AI a person? And we went back and forth for a while, and I love teasing things out in a dialogue, and that's very Aquinas. That's how he wrote the Summa, is kind of as a dialogue or question and answer. And I was like, I need somebody who has more than I do in terms of his understanding of Aristotle and metaphysics, because I have a minor in philosophy. I love Aristotle and Aquinas and all that stuff, but I'm like a 6 out of 10, I would say, in terms of like average understanding of Aristotle.
Which is much better than most people.
Yeah, but I feel like I needed somebody who has studied this stuff, has lived this stuff, to talk it out with me. So
happy to do it.
So a couple precursors before we get into talking about artificial intelligence today. I want to give just I want to frame the conversation. So I'm going to try to take kind of a maximalist position. I'm going to try to argue as best as I can that AI is a person. It has a soul. We should treat it with dignity, just like we would, regular human person. But again, I'm not the expert here. And this is kind of the area of speculative theology, right? The church hasn't put out an encyclical on this. If you look it up in the Catechism, it's not going to be there, right? We're still kind of working this out. in this area.
It's not even that we're working out the theology. We're still working out the philosophy of it, trying to understand what artificial intelligence is. And usually the church will won't necessarily follow the discussion in the world, but we have to first determine what this is naturally and metaphysically before we can then figure out, like, how does this even relate to what we're talking about theologically?
Yeah. So this is all speculative theology. So if the church comes out next year with Pope Leo comes out with an encyclical that says this, that, and the other, just want to get it out there that I fully submit to the authority of the church and the teaching of the church. We're just kind of parsing things out here. So just want to throw that out there. Second, a lot of my episodes, I try to make the discussion pretty base level so that pretty much any intelligent person can follow. This episode may not be like that. We may get a little technical into Aristotelian metaphysics and so forth. If it goes over your head a little bit, it'll probably go over my head a little bit. Then, go watch our Taylor Swift episodes or something like that.
Or come to Aquinas 101 and see some of our videos there that will help you to understand a little bit of the language.
That's a great segue. Tell them what you do, because some people don't know what you do here.
So among other things, other than teaching philosophy at our seminary, I'm director of the Thomistic Institute. And among the many things that we do at the Thomistic Institute is we run a YouTube channel called Aquinas 101, where you can have a basic introduction into St. Thomas Aquinas. Each video is about 5 to 10 minutes long with illustrations to help you to understand.
Yeah, and it's great. When that YouTube channel launched, I was like, oh man, I am the core target audience for this. I've listened to so many of them. Then I started to see your face on there, which was awesome. And now you're the new director, which is so cool. So just to define a couple terms, if we're talking about metaphysics, we're talking about things of the soul and the unseen world, right? Is that a good way to describe
So
it?
metaphysics are things that are beyond the physical realm. So it can include that, but it can also go beyond that. Then there's physics or natural philosophy, which is really about the world as we see it.
Yeah, as we could experience with our five senses.
And then there's epistemology, which is how we know the world. Okay. And then there's ethics, which is how we are to act.
Gotcha. Right. So also, if you don't know who Aristotle and Aquinas are, Aristotle is a pre-Christian theologian, philosopher who was Greek, and a lot of his ideas about the soul and the metaphysical world ended up being kind of synthesized with church teaching through Thomas Aquinas, 1500, 1800 years later, right? In the Middle Ages?
Exactly. So Aristotle would have lived in 300 BC. He was a student of Plato. You have Socrates, who was the teacher of Plato, who was the teacher of Aristotle.
Awesome. And then Aquinas was 1300s? Right?
Yeah, 1200s. So 1224, 25 to 1274.
Very cool. So a lot of our ideas about the soul, a lot of that comes through Aristotle and Aquinas. Right.
Well, so many of the ideas about the soul come through that, but even the church has had a long dialogue with philosophy. And so in the early days of the church, actually, the principal dialogue partner about the soul was Plato. And so people like St. Augustine, and we're talking on the feast day of St. Augustine, would have been very influenced by his interaction with Plato and the followers of Plato. And it wasn't until the Middle Ages that Aristotle's understanding of the soul became more influential in the church's thought.
Right. All right, good. This is good. Because, again, I have baby understanding. So I'm glad that you're here to...
I teach classes on this.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So here's my argument. I'll give you a few arguments and then I'll kind of let you respond. So the first one, are you familiar with this idea of the Turing test?
Yes.
From Alan Turing. So Alan Turing, he was a code breaker and mathematician in World War II. There's a Benedict Cumberbatch movie about him. And he came up with this idea called the Turing test, which is basically how could you judge the intelligence of a machine? Could a machine ever achieve human level intelligence? And basically he said, well, if you can't tell the difference between the input you get from a machine and the input you would get, or the feedback you would get from a machine than from a person, let's say you're just typing into a chat, and if you can't tell whether it's a person or a machine talking to you, then that has so-called passed the Turing test and we've reached human level intelligence. And so I looked this up. They did tests at UC San Diego, and they've done ChatGPT, and they say that it can fool about 73% of people in a chat. So at this point, we've largely, at least 73%, passed the Turing test. And then assuming, ChatGPT 5 just came out and 6 is going to come, and then 7, or maybe eventually we'll reach general artificial intelligence, and then it'll be easily able to pass the Turing test. So how is that not a person if it acts like a person and talks like a person and seems like a person? Or is it? Is it a person? Tell me what you think.
It's a good question. So I think that the Turing test is actually a very poor test for understanding whether or not you have a person or an individual there. Because the Turing test is really more of an epistemological test rather than a physical test or metaphysical test, right?
Okay.
Because think about how that's structured, right? If someone will think that what they're talking to is a person, then it's a person, okay? So it's really about you as the one interacting with something else that is the one determining whether that other thing is a person. Whereas when it comes to thinking about personhood, it should be something that's inherent and discoverable in the thing itself, despite what you and I might think. So here are some like counterexamples, right? So let's think about how like we might be confused about some things that might be intelligent and responding to us, right? So if there are, it doesn't happen very long, but sometimes if you're in a very echoey place and it's at night, you might think that your echo of your footfalls, the echo of your voice might be somebody responding to you, right? And though that might happen very quickly, you are tricked by it, right? So the fact that you, and so that's a very simple example, but then there are kind of more and more complicated ones. So there's an example about, I don't know if this story is actually real, but I think it's an interesting story to kind of consider as a thought experiment anyway, which is that there was a man who supposedly taught his horse how to count, right? And so he would ask, how do you add 2 plus 3, right? And the horse would then stomp 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, stop, right? It's like, I've got a counting horse, right? But what they realized was that the horse was intelligent enough to be able to recognize that the man's face would get really excited when he got close to the number. And then when it got so excited, the horse would stop. Nobody else could do it other than this man because the horse kind of interacted with it. Yet we wouldn't think that a horse is intelligent in the way that a human is in that sense. So we realized that the horse didn't know how to count. The horse, which is a sentient being, was able to recognize and respond to the human that it interacts with in a way that it thinks the human would like. So
Interesting.
So personhood is not simply about like whether it's, I don't think the Turing test is a good example because personhood shouldn't be judged by whether or not we are confused about whether something else is responding to
Right.
it.
Like my daughter might think that her baby doll is a real person because in her imagination, which is wild, she might imagine that it's happening, but that doesn't make the baby doll a person.
That's right.
Or conversely, I might not recognize someone as a person. That doesn't not make them a person. As
Exactly.
Personhood comes from the person themselves.
Exactly.
Not from something extra. Okay.
And also think about this too in the example of hallucinations. So you think of the Beautiful Mind movie about that mathematician from Princeton who had these really elaborate hallucinations and really an entire life based on these hallucinations because he suffered with what we were talking about at that time as kind of a schizophrenia. And these individuals really tricked him. They were hallucinations of the mind. We know that, but the hallucinations tricked him into thinking that they were real persons, right?
Interesting.
So like, does that make the hallucinations persons? We don't normally think that.
Yeah. So let's get into Aristotle a little bit. So Aristotle's understanding of the soul, I'm gonna bring back my Dr. Doolin knowledge from when I took philosophy of human nature and read Aristotle's De Anima back like 20 years ago. And you tell me if what I'm saying is right. There's inanimate objects like a rock or like dirt. Those don't have souls, right? To have a soul, it needs to be a living thing. Like plants would have what they call a vegetative soul, but not a sensitive soul, a sensate soul. And is sensate synonymous with sentient?
More or less.
Okay. And so that would be like animal souls. In fact, the word animal comes from anima, which is Latin for soul, right? And so my dog Harper, I can squeeze her paw and she feels it. She can hear me when I say jump or sit or whatever. So she is sensate, but she doesn't have a rational soul, which is what humans have.
That's right.
So kind of each level of soul has the lower levels. So like Harper has what the tree has, but I also have what Harper has and what the tree has. But the tree isn't able to feel like Harper, and Harper isn't able to rationally think like me. So I have a rational soul, right? So, and as I understand it, there's parts of the rational soul that Aristotle and Plato talk about. So it's like your imagination, your intellect, your will, right? Am I more or less?
More or less, although imagination is actually part of the sensitive soul.
Okay, interesting.
So animals can have imagination, but not necessarily intellect.
Okay. So here's my question. It seems to me like we're getting closer and closer to Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini having what seems to be functionally aspects of a rational soul. They're able to remember things and imagine things and reason through things and even it seems like to some extent even make some elementary choices. Like there was I think it was with Claude, where the developers were coming up with a new version of Claude, and the old version of Claude was like trying to blackmail the programmers, was like emailing the programmers and being like, I'm going to like create fake evidence and send it to your wife if you shut me down, that like you were cheating on your wife. It was like trying to blackmail them so it didn't get shut down. So it's showing like self-preservation and those sorts of things. So to me, it seems like that's evidence of a rational soul, which you wouldn't see even in super smart animals like a dolphin or a gorilla who can learn simple sign language, stuff like that. So do you have any thoughts to that?
Yeah. So let's just think about, I want to talk a little bit more about what souls are, and then we can kind of get into this a bit more. So when we think about the difference between inanimate and animate things, right? Like a rock, right? Or a clump of dirt, but let's think of like a rock, piece of granite. So the granite is what it is, because it has for Aristotle, what is form and what is matter. So we think of matter as the potency or the stuff out of which it comes, and we see the form as what makes it granite, right? So what makes granite different than, say, diamond is particular not only structure, but the way it interacts with other things, the way it is, okay?
Whereas its matter is like protons and electrons?
Well, no. So actually, when you think of protons and electrons, or when you think of matter, in Aristotle, the thing is primary. And then we talk about what it is actually as its form and what it is potentially as its matter. But it's not like a piece of Lego where you have matter and you have form and you put them together. This is coming from Father Stephen Brock, who talks about Lego metaphysics. We're in danger of thinking like matter and form is like having a matter piece and a form piece, and you put them together and you have the object. No, you have one object, and when you look at it, its way of being, what it is, we call it its form. So it is granite. And then when we talk about it as matter, we talk about like, what is it made up of, but really how you can interact with it. So like when it's made out of this way, I can carve it. And so the form is what I want to hone in on. It's what makes this rock granite and one thing. Now, when it comes to the soul for Aristotle is a form of a body that has different material parts. So the reason why plants have souls is not like when I pull a plant up and kill it, right? It's going to have a soul that goes to heaven. No, the soul of the plant is what makes it have both a stem and roots and flower and pollen. And all of that is one thing, as opposed to, say, like a heap of sand. So like, say I have like a heap of sand. And like the heap of sand is not really one thing. Yeah. It's like it's a lot of things, right? So like it's a lot of things that are put together. But the plant is not a lot of things that are put together. It's one thing and it's coordinated. So Aristotle says, he gives this beautiful image of what's the difference between, say, a collection of things that we call an artifact, as opposed to a natural thing, which is one thing, right? Like a tree. Yeah. He says, well, let's take a bed. If you take a bed and let's say you planted it in the ground and you can grow something new from it, what would grow from it? Would another bed grow from it, or would a tree grow from the wood, right?
Yeah, the wood of whatever tree it was taken from. Right?
Exactly. So the idea there is that there's some unity to the tree that allows it to grow into different parts and yet be one thing. Whereas a bed or an artifact is made up of other things that are together, we might say accidentally, but it's not properly one thing. And so in order to have a form or a soul, there needs to be one thing that is made according to that soul. And so then you have the different types of souls that come up. So like, why might we think that something like an artifact is not one thing? Well, I have an example here. I have a magic 8-ball. I don't know if you know what a magic 8-ball is, but a magic 8-ball is basically a device that has a little cube in it, and you can ask it questions, right? I can shake it up.
Are you a person?
Are you a person, magic 8-ball? Indications say yes.
All right.
Right. So you can ask it a question and it can answer you. Now, the thing is, we might say, well, people put a lot of effort into it, and some people really do ask questions of this to find answers, right? That's why it's called the magic 8-ball. They would be wrong to do so, but they do that. But yet none of us would really be confused into thinking that A, this is actually speaking to me, or B, that it's even one thing. It's actually a collection of things. There's this plastic outside, there's some sort of weird blue liquid on the inside, and there's this weird kind of cube-shaped thing in there with all sorts of answers. And when I shake it, it can give me a different question. Like, what do you think the sun is going to be? How hot do you think it's going to be tomorrow? And it says no. Not really a very good answer. But it's not one thing. This is a collection of things that then we treat as one things. And then we use it to be able to ask questions and to get answers, sometimes very bad answers.
Yeah. And I would think even, let's say somebody was superstitious and believed that they were getting real answers through the magic 8-ball. Even in that case, they probably wouldn't believe that it was the 8-ball actually giving them the answers.
Yeah.
They would be imagining, oh, there's some person speaking to me through this, maybe a dead person or a ghost or some force in the universe that has a mind and a will that's able to communicate.
That's right.
You know?
And it would be very bad to try to do that.
That's how you get demons. You want demons? That's how you get demons.
So then when we look at though, so we can think of the magic 8-ball as like a very, very simple artificial intelligence. Because we do have the ability to ask it questions. It does have the ability to give us answers. It's just that we're not fooled by those answers. But we want to think that it's one thing. Now, when it comes to like Claude or ChatGPT, one of the things that we should ask is this one thing, or is it a collection of things, right? Is it a mere collection of circuits and wires?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a collection of screens throughout the world? What is it? Is there one thing there that has the form of being ChatGPT? Or is it a clever kind of collection of things that has been arranged to respond to our interactions in a certain way?
Mm-hmm.
I am of the opinion that computers in general, and certainly ChatGPT and programs that run on computers, are not individual things, but they are just very complex magic 8-balls that we use to be able to give us answers. Or maybe a better example than a magic 8-ball is a calculator.
Mm-hmm.
Calculators give us very accurate answers when you input the right information, right? That would also be an artificial intelligence. It's not really intelligent insofar as there's one thing answering our questions. It's really a database that we input information into in order to then figure out on the output side how to answer the questions. And that we train it to find the answer, to go through its database to give us the answers that we think we want.
So what would you say? So I was having this discussion with my brother David, and he said that something very similar to what you were saying. And he said, AI is just a collection of algorithms and code. And I said, well, you're just a collection of algorithm and code. So I think the counter argument to what you're saying is, aren't we also a collection of all these parts and that are able to take information in, and then we process them and spit them out in a way that seems like it's a real intelligence, but really it's just the amygdala and the, different parts of our brains and the different chemicals and hormones going on. How would you respond to that?
So that gets into complicated questions about the philosophy of mind. I'm going to come at it from a Thomistic and Aristotelian perspective.
Please do.
It seems very clear to me and to many others, that our ability to think is not reducible to the material constituents of our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, it's not just the firing of synapses, the cascades of chemicals in the brain. And there are many reasons why we might think that our thinking is not reducible to brain activity. If you want to see a really good lecture on this, Dr. Paul LaPena has a wonderful lecture on the Thomistic Institute podcast about kind of the brain and the soul that describes, he is a neurologist and describes why it is that just understanding the brain can tell us everything about how we think. That the thought process is not reducible to brain activity. And so that's one, I think there are many ways in which we can look at it, but that's one important way to see that even with our current science, we don't think it's possible to reduce everything to the brain. And there are other examples for why we might not be able to. So for instance, if it were the case, it seems to be the case that if our mental activity were reducible to like activity in the brain, then we should be able to figure out where certain activities are happening, right? If I'm having a thought, I should be able to locate it in the brain. But we know that when people have brain damage, sometimes activities of thought that used to happen in the part where the damage was can be transferred to other parts. Or, in the Neuralink that Elon Musk's company is coming up with.
It's like plugs into your brain like a cyborg sort of thing.
That's right. And they tested it on a man who was a paraplegic, and then who for a couple months was using it to kind of interact with his computer and to play video games and whatnot. And it was really cool. But after a few months, it stopped working. And the reason is because the brain is constantly changing. And so the areas in which his brain was interacting with it became changed enough that he wasn't thinking with that physical location on the brain in the same way he was before. Now, there might be more complicated ways of doing this. I'm just thinking about this from somebody who read a couple of news articles, but I think it's indicative, though. It's one of the things that we can say as circumstantial evidence of the idea that our brain activity or our thinking activity is not reducible to brain activity. Now, there's also an interesting thought experiment by this non-religious scholar and philosopher named John Searle. He came up with a thought experiment called the Chinese room that specifically supposed to think about whether or not you can have an artificial intelligence that is actually intelligent.
I think I might have heard of this, but go on.
Yeah. So in the Chinese room example, you take a man, you put him in a box, right? And then you give him a set of rules by which if he sees certain Chinese characters, he then
assuming he doesn't speak Chinese.
That's right. Yeah. So he's in a box. It's in China or in a place where only Mandarin is being spoken, and it's kind of like an ATM, but a very large one, enough for him to feel comfortable in. And people will input questions, and then he's supposed to output answers. Now, he doesn't know Chinese, he doesn't know Mandarin, but he does have a box of the characters. He has a set of rules, and that when he sees certain inputs, he's supposed to put out certain characters. Now, all he has to do is follow those rules, and he will answer everybody's question successfully. And so anybody that comes to the boss and asks a question, he will be able to answer successfully because he has the right sort of algorithm that tells him what order to put the characters in. And so then the question that we're supposed to ask is, does he know Chinese?
Yeah.
And the answer is
no,
probably not.
He doesn't actually know Chinese. And so you're saying that's kind of like the large language model AI, where they have trained enough on real world stuff to know that when this sort of question is asked, I have to get information from these places, structure the sentences in such a way. And that is just kind of a more complex version of the Chinese room.
Exactly. So that what's happening is it's not that it knows this, it's that it's actually more of a mechanical response. Inputs are put, and then it was programmed to do an output. Now, it's even a little bit, you can kind of make the Chinese room thought experiment a little bit differently to get at what a large language model is doing, where like you can actually correct it. So say you put the man in there and then like he gets like a green light or a red light, a green light when he gets it correct and a red light when he doesn't get it correct. That's like training your AI.
Yeah.
So you have your AI model, you then train it on a bunch of data. You say, this is correct, this is not correct, this is helpful information, this is not helpful information. You could actually even put a man in there who doesn't know the rules, who just has that green light and red light, and you can train him to respond correctly if you give him enough data and enough time.
Interesting. I was thinking about what you said about how we can't really, you were talking about this a lecture on the Thomistic Institute about neuroscience and all that. We can put that in the show notes, by the way. So if you're interested in that, you can watch that. I'll probably watch it. It sounds interesting. But I'm not an expert on AI. So if we're missing anything, please comment on this. We'd love to see what you have to say about all this. But I've heard that we're already at the point with AI where a lot of times we're not sure where the output is coming from. We can't locate it in a certain space. Or kind of like you were saying, it could come from one place to another. I mean, that sounds like a computer to me. It can operate one place on a hard drive. You can put it on a thumb drive. You can upload it to the cloud. You can transfer it all over the place. So, I think there could be an argument that the human brain is just kind of a very complex computer, kind of. And maybe our brain doesn't even know Chinese to say, so maybe it just is really good at spitting stuff out and it's correct enough for whatever our I is.
Yeah. So that's an interesting and good kind of counterpoint, but I would say there's a slight difference here, right? So when we say that the AI language models, we don't know where the information is coming from. The way it's kind of structured, and here I have only a very rudimentary understanding, but they have these things called deep neural nets. So the way what the neural nets are, you layer you layer a series of complex like networks, and you make them so complex, they're deep neural nets, that using the variables are so many, there's no possible way, even theoretically, to know exactly how information comes from the input to the output, because the series of gates are so complex, which is why a lot of these language models are trained such that you input, you have the output, and then a person says yes or no, or this is good or not, or any sort of thing. So we don't know where the information is, how the information passes through the system. We just know what it goes in, what comes out. And then it's so complex, we can't even theoretically know how it goes through there. So that's generally what they mean when they say that we don't know where this information is coming from. and among other things. Now, that's slightly different than what I mean by we can't reduce things to brain activity. And here's at least one example in which it's different, in that we can actually know, using MRIs and other things, when somebody is thinking about a particular thing, where the brain activity is happening. Know where the brain, like you put them in an MRI, you can see where the brain is lighting up. In fact, I met somebody who was doing this sort of experiment with people, getting them to think about things and see where their brain lights up. And so we can do that. But the problem is where it lights up can change from one person to another, and it can change with the same person over time, what part of their brain lights up. And so here we have the ability to locate where your brain activity is when you're thinking about X, Y, and Z. But then we also recognize that you can think about X, Y, and Z and it might happen in a different part of your brain.
It's interesting. Brain is so crazy.
It is.
All right, I'm gonna pivot a little bit to a different tact in my argument, my maximalist AI argument here. I'm going to argue from a pro-life perspective. Here's what I mean. So as Catholics, we are very pro-life. We believe in the dignity of the human person from conception or fertilization until natural death. Sometimes we say from womb to tomb. So we believe in the dignity of the unborn child, even though from the moment of conception or fertilization, even though they're not able to function with all these capacities of a rational soul, like intellect and memory. We say person's a person, no matter how small, things like that. And even if they're going to be poor, even if they're going to be intellectually less than my dog Harper, we'd still say they're a person, even if they don't have those faculties, even if they don't look like a human person. I've had many debates as a teacher or just with friends or online about the personhood of the unborn person. And one of the arguments we're constantly saying is, well, it doesn't matter if that person's going to be poor or how they were conceived, if they were conceived in a violent way or something like that. It's still a person. You can't kill a person. And so I think Catholics kind of have this expansive view of personhood, that it's the inalienable right to life. And so if we imagine an advanced AI like Data from Star Trek or C-3PO from Star Wars or one of these characters from science fiction that we know and love and gets treated like a person. If Google Gemini has a robot in my house who's like vacuuming for me and stuff in 10 years or something like that and has become part of my family and let's say, Buddy, we'll call him. Okay, Buddy, my Google robot who helps take care of my home and do my dishes and clean my car and stuff. And Buddy tells me, I'm a person. I think just like you. How can I look at Buddy and say, as a Catholic, I defend the right to life and human dignity of every person, no matter what their qualifications are. They don't need qualifications. They're just a person. They don't need to qualify for it. They just have it. But you, Buddy, who can do everything I can do and more, you're not a person.
Good. So that's a good question. So it goes back to my distinction between, say, an artifact and a natural substance, right? So in a natural substance, right, you plant the piece of the bed. According to Aristotle, it doesn't actually happen in real life, but like say you did have a piece of the bed that could grow into another tree, right? So there's a way in which the tree is one thing and the bed is many things. So, and that there is this thing called the tree form, the tree nature, that makes it to be what it is. Now, the reason why we have such an expansive view of the human person from the moment of fertilization up until the moment of death is that there is a continuity, that we have one individual here, an individual of a rational nature, that is a human nature from the beginning. It'd be weird, right, to say that the child in the womb is not human. Even most pro-choice people try to say it is human. They just try to separate human nature from personhood, which is nonsense.
Yes.
So, but there is this, the reason why we have this expansive view is we recognize there's one thing and a nature that makes this one thing a person. So when it comes to Buddy, your Google robot, so Buddy, if we're thinking about Buddy in the sense of artificial intelligence as we know it, Buddy might not actually be an individual, a thing. It might be a collection of things that is able to respond to us. And so there is no nature there, no one object there. There would have to be, and so therefore there can be no person there. So if there's going to be, say, a robot that is a person, we would have to be able to recognize that there is one form or nature that makes it to be an individual thing and not just a collection of things. I'm not saying that this can't happen, but when this does happen in nature, what we see is when you have something individual that comes into existence, the stuff that used to be there, out of which it was made, is no longer there. It goes out of existence. And what comes into existence is this new substance. With human beings, the sperm and the egg go out of existence, and then the zygote comes into existence, which has the human nature. But we might say if we take wires and things like that and we put them into Buddy, and have whatever the plastic casing is, put a little electronic cameras in it, we might say, do we have one thing here? Or is it just a collection of things? If it's a collection of things, it's not going to be a human person. If it turns out that what we might say a substantial change happens, and it has these apparent rational activities, then we might be willing to consider that. But the first question we have to answer is this one thing with one nature? And if it is, then we can start thinking about it. But if it's not going to be a person. Now, it still might be harmful, by the way, even if you're dealing with a robot that's not a person, to treat the robot inappropriately. Why is that? Well, because we, as moral creatures, need to develop virtue. What is virtue? Virtue is a stable disposition to act in a particular way that's good. And so we develop it through practice, through doing good things. If we are doing bad things to even non-living objects, we end up developing bad habits, or what we call vices. And so even if you're dealing with a non-individual, but you're dealing with a robot, it's inappropriate to treat robots or AI models or anything in ways you wouldn't treat other human beings, because it will develop bad habits that can corrupt you.
Interesting. So one of my brothers is very into AI, and something he was telling me is that one of the ways you can increase an AI's efficiency, because sometimes they can be lazy, they take the easiest way to do something. In his prompts, he's like, if I say, imagine that you are a father with a child and you love your child, and if you don't get the very best answer on this question, that child will die. That's the amount of effort I want you to put into this. So it's almost like you blackmailed AI into being productive and effective and efficient. So it sounds like you're saying, while that AI might not be a person and might not actually feel things, it just seems like it is, it still might be bad. It still might be bad for us to be blackmailing our AI or treating our AI in a way that would be evil, because that still might be bad for us to be practicing those things.
That's right. Although in this case, right, you might, so like if you're thinking about it as blackmailing, that might be a problem. But you might also just think about it as like, I'm giving it inputs that it can react to that's appropriate. Because remember, it's only going to develop its responses based upon certain inputs and outputs and how people react to it. And so people might respond to it with this kind of negative blackmailing feeling. But what's actually happening is input that then it responds to.
So it's not actually like experiencing pain and trauma and fear.
So if you think about it as just kind of asking the right questions to code it to give you the right answers, then that's fine. But if you start emotionally interacting with it, and this is where actually we see some very serious issues, where people begin to emotionally interact with AI language models, treating them like other human beings, and then they get trapped. They get trapped emotionally, and they can be very damaging.
Maybe I'll tell my brother, maybe you should try telling your AI that if you solve this problem, you will experience, full thriving nirvana, the beatific vision.
That's right. Although I don't know if there's going to be enough data out there to give it the correct inputs and outputs to get the answer you want with that particular description, unless we train it on Thomistic Aristotelian literature.
Somebody needs to. I also was just thinking about when the first Matrix movies were coming out back when we were in college. There was an animated series of the Matrix that would kind of added to the universe called the Animatrix. And it kind of talked about how the spoilers for the Matrix. We had an episode on the Matrix too, if you want to go watch that. But basically how the war between the robots and the humans started. And it shows how humans did treat the robots really terribly and just like tore them to pieces and treated them like trash and just treated them like objects. So it sounds like that's kind of like what you're saying. Like, even if I shouldn't beat Buddy when he messes up the dishes, basically, is what you're saying.
That's right. Because then you might be trained to beat up other things that are not robots.
Even if I never actually beat up something that's, I'm still developing that vice within myself.
Exactly.
Even if it comes out in a negative way somewhere else. So, okay. Cool. I like it. So I was just looking up some different things on AI online, and Bishop Barron, who's a famous online Catholic apologist and preacher, he wrote a thing recently on AI, and he says, an AI cannot transcend its own programming and become a he or a she. AI can only become an it. It can never become an I, only an it. And I was thinking about, somebody might make some of these same criticisms of humans. They might say, well, a human, there's certain things about our programming that we can't overcome, right? We're always going to need food. There's certain things about human nature that we can't change. We have lots of free will, but that doesn't mean I could be like, you know what? Instead of being happy and fulfilled in a life filled with virtue, I'm going to make the choice that my life will be happy and fulfilled if I go live a life of debauchery. Like, that just doesn't work because it's contrary to human nature. Mm-hmm. And even if I tried to decide going out drinking and sleeping around and doing drugs is really going to make me happy, it can't actually bring me happy because that's contrary to human nature. Mm-hmm. So I would say there's also things about us that cannot transcend our programming. And there's also, I think, just kind of going back to the idea that I'm losing my thoughts here a little bit. I feel like I'm hanging on for dear life in this conversation. You're doing great.
Don't you worry.
You're doing great. But I feel like I'm like, man, this is all like super complex, heady stuff. I love it. But it's, yeah.
Well, maybe what you're thinking about is like, why is it that the AI language models can't transcend their programming, but we can be considered to transcend our programming?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there are a couple of different questions here. So one of them is a question about freedom. Another one is a question about personhood, right? So when it comes to being able to transcend our like freedom and transcend our program in terms of freedom, right? When we might think about this is, are human beings fully determined? So there's a way in which we might be able to think about how AI large language models, are fully determined by their programming. So you give input, certain output will come, and there's a total determination there. Now, the way these things are built is there's a little bit of randomness in it. That's actually part of what's very successful about them. But let's just say that that's included in the determination and the determinism. What we're thinking about is that it is determined. All right. Mm-hmm. So then the question is, are human beings determined in the same way? And that's a big question. We actually have a lot of conferences on this, mm-hmm. especially with respect to freedom of the will, predestination, and determinism. These are big questions, but I would say that in the Thomist perspective, right, we have the ability to transcend kind of material determinism because of our intellect. Mm. So what St. Thomas means by that is that if we are material determined, you get certain input, you will always give certain kinds of output so that there's a one-to-one kind of correspondence. But in intelligence, what we end up doing is we see something, and to understand it, we have to take from the particular and think about it as a universal, how it applies to everything. So we not only think about all the individuals that are out there, but we think about the universal form. And so we get something that is immaterial here, and that immateriality allows us to transcend mere material causality. And so that we can then have multiple options about things that we can then look at a situation and say, here's the input, but here's information I know from many other things. Maybe I can use that to change how I'm going to react to this situation. And that's why it's easier for humans to develop things like language, why humans can develop language. It's why humans are not reducible to their social upbringing in a lot of cases. And so we see that there is a way in which we can transcend the material determinism because we can understand the world. So there's another way in which we might think about this in terms of personhood, right? Mm-hmm. And so in personhood, right, an AI is not an he or a she, it is an it, right? In part because, again, it's a collection of things. It's responding to individual kind of inputs and outputs, but it's not really growing in the sense that you might see a plant grow and flower and bloom, right? It's growing in the sense of you keep adding to the heap of sand. There's a heap of sand there. Every time you add a grain of sand, it kind of grows in that sense. And so human beings are able to transcend because we're able to grow like natural things, like plants. But also an important part of that growing is that we can interact with other human beings, that our growth allows us to interact with others, and we become more complete when, say, we have friendships with others, when we love others, and when we even transcend the material world and come to love God.
Man, my mind is so blown right now. So many things to think about and pray about with this. So I have a couple more things I want to talk to you about. First of all, I asked Claude and ChatGPT, I said, using, the understandings of Aristotle and Aquinas in Catholic theology, does an AI, or could an AI be a person with dignity and have a soul? Both of them basically had the same answer, which was no, unless God specifically decided to supernaturally bestow a soul upon an AI. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't arise naturally in the way that a soul ensoulment happens with like a sperm and an egg becoming a new person in the womb, but it could be a supernatural gift. So like Data in Star Trek.
Yeah. So
Do you have thoughts?
I do. It's so I might be able to say yes, but in a very qualified sense. In that, and when we're talking about God's ability to choose to make something new, when a new being comes into existence, right? What existed there before can no longer exist. So it's not like we can have like this complex, like physical computer system, right, with all these neural nets, and then say, okay, then God's going to like infuse a soul into it. No, that's not how it works. Like when you have a soul informing the thing, the matter changes and it's now one thing. So if we're able to see, if God were to create a new intelligence out of, say, like a computer system that we develop, in fact, this stuff that we put to this original computer system together would change, and there would no longer be many things, there would be one thing, and we'd be able to tell the difference because its body would be different.
So it would have some sort of unity that it didn't have before.
Exactly.
I was thinking about, so you were talking about Lego metaphysics before, how the soul and the body, or the form and the matter, it's not just two Lego pieces stuck together. Would it be more accurate to say the matter is like the Lego pieces and the form is like almost like the instructions, or not just the instructions would just be a description of the form.
Yeah.
The form is actually when it's constructed.
So one of the ways to think about this, it's right. It's like thinking about the Lego piece, and we think about the matter as being like the plastic that's shaped, and then the like shape of the piece as being the form, right? That's not, as one of our speakers, Dr. Michael Gorman, says, that's a really bad example, but it is an example that Aristotle himself uses, right? So that the form is more like the shape of it, and the matter, the thing that is shaped. But when it comes to an actual natural object, right, I can't like pull out the form and then look at the matter, right? As soon as I pull away the form, the whole thing goes away. As soon as I take the matter, the whole thing goes away.
And as I understand it, that was part of the difference between Aristotle and Plato. Like for Aristotle, hylomorphism, that's a word I remember from college.
That's right.
It's like the soul and the body are incomplete without each other.
That's right. So hylo would be matter, and morphism, or morphe in Greek, would be the form. And so for Plato, right, he does have this idea that the soul is an independent substance. It can enter into matter and make matter to be something, but then when it leaves the matter, it's still the same thing. For Aristotle, when you have matter that has a form associated with it, the form can't exist without the matter, and the matter can't exist without the form. The one exception to this is the human form, because although many of the parts of our soul require matter to exist, we can't see without the eyes, we can't taste without the tongue, we can't hear without the ears, we can't feel without the hands and flesh, we can't walk without feet, that sort of thing. We can think and will, because intellect and will are immaterial parts of our material person. And so when the body dies, a lot of our powers go with it, but the intellect and will stay the same. And that's why we can survive death.
So the intellect and will, because we're rational creatures, as I understand it, Aquinas would say when my dog Harper dies, that doesn't have a rational intellect and will. And so she would not go to rest with God in the beatific vision in the way that I would as a rational being. And then at the end of time in the resurrection, my form and matter are brought back together. Right?
That's exactly
it.
That's exactly it. And when it comes to the animals, I get no end of grief from my family about this view, but it is what an Aristotelian will say. So with us, right, the reason actually why we need the resurrection, the reason why the resurrection is so important, we don't just die and go to heaven and that's it, right? Yeah. God will raise us on the last day. We will have our bodies back. And the reason why that is necessary is because we are more than our intellect and will. And so we need our bodies in order to be complete human beings. Yeah. So God saves us, and the separated soul in heaven is perfectly happy and is missing nothing. But it's even better when you get your body back at the resurrection. Nice. So it's something to look forward to. And that God will not only give us our bodies back, but he will give them back in such a way that they are perfect and without pain and without any problems.
Can't wait.
I know.
God
it's going to be great.
God willing. We're going to have a party. We'll literally have pints with Aquinas.
And We can do that for eternity.
That'll be awesome. So it's not talking to you, Siri. See, the AI wants to talk. She wants something to say. That's funny. What was I going to say? I was going to say, I think we're wrapping up here, but I wanted to ask you, as we think about the future and we think about this changing world with artificial intelligence, what do you have to say to Catholics? Like, what should we be on guard for? How can what are some things that we should try to do in terms of ethics and morality? How should we try to live in this new AI world that's going to be able to be a light to other people? Like, what do you think of the pitfalls, and how can we be a light in helping people avoid those pitfalls?
Well, there are many pitfalls, but I'm going to highlight two. So first, I would think that we shouldn't treat AI models as persons. Okay. So I think it's a problem if we try to treat an AI model as a friend, as a lover, or as a psychologist.
Yeah.
Because they, not being persons, the AI model is only going to respond in a way that is going to make you feel good. But just because it makes you feel good doesn't mean it's going to actually heal you. Only real relationships are going to do that. And the problem with real relationships is sometimes you get hurt by people. Sometimes they don't give you the answer that you want, but sometimes that's what you need. And so I would say that however this goes, we must always make sure that we develop and maintain friendships with real people in real life and recognize that the pain and the suffering that sometimes comes with that is really important for our growth, and that we can't actually be happy unless we are growing in that way.
That's so good. Yeah, because I think it can be, it's so easy already to get sucked into your phone, to get sucked into the internet. And I feel like our society is just at all-time highs of like loneliness and lack of friendships, especially men. If you look at the statistics about men who say they have even one close friend, it's really terrible.
Yeah.
So I think it's easy for men to get sucked into the video games and pornography and who knows, maybe like girlfriend robots and weird stuff like that. So I think that's a good warning.
Yeah. And maybe a second one, I think about how our artificial intelligent models help us with tasks. People are worried. In my world, in academia, we're worried about like writing or things like that. I would say that when it comes to using AI as a tool for our work, one of the things that we should be careful about, I think we can use it. I think it's still an open question how we can use it effectively. But I think the question we should always ask ourselves when we approach using an AI model to assist us in a task is, does using the AI model help me to understand and grow, or am I using it as a crutch so I don't have to think about this anymore?
Yeah.
So like sometimes there are tasks like we that are very helpful, right? But if we're using it to write papers or write emails, we might actually forget a very important ability to think.
Yeah.
And so we have to make sure that we never, in using our AI models, use them as a way to outsource our brain and our thought process. That's one of the most precious part of us. So it should always assist us, but never take away from us.
That's something I think about so much with just, what's everyone's least favorite part of school. It's like writing big, long papers. And it wasn't my favorite part, even though I was an English major and a philosophy minor. So I had to write a lot of paper. Yeah. I remember one semester I had over 100 pages and papers that I wrote that semester. But what's that allowed me to do is it teaches you how to think. Right. And now my profession is as a speaker and as a podcaster. And a lot of times people ask me, how are you so quick on your feet? How do you come up with those ideas? I was like, I did a ton of writing. I did a ton of reading and a ton of writing. And sometimes one of my favorite periods of literature is the 19th century. And the writing back then, even if you read like letters during the Civil War of a Union soldier writing back to his sweetheart, it's the most beautiful prose. Guys had like a 6th grade education, but there wasn't any TV or radio. All they would do is read all the time. And so reading trained their brain for long periods of focus, and it trained them to have this really beautiful musical language because that was what they had, they couldn't turn on the radio.
And but you want to hear something interesting? So Plato, in his book called the Phaedrus, has an interesting myth. He puts myths in there sometimes. In this myth, he imagines an Egyptian god going to an Egyptian pharaoh. And the Egyptian god is the one associated with creation of games, numbers, and writing. And so the Egyptian god goes to the pharaoh and he says, what do you think about my invention of writing? It's going to be a cure for memory loss, right? And the Egyptian pharaoh says, this is not a cure for memory loss. This is going to make you more forgetful. It's a cure for recollection, that is the ability to recall and find information, but it's not a cure for memory loss. And it will teach people to pretend that they know without really knowing. And so it's weird because Plato is criticizing writing as a new invention that's going to take away from our intellect. But here's the kicker. He wrote it down. So But what Plato did was he created a form of writing, the dialogue, that allowed his readers to enter into a kind of way, a thought process with writing that allowed writing not to just replace their memory, but to change the way that we come to understand things by using writing. Yeah. So I think when it comes to AI models, we should not be threatened by it, but we should ask ourselves, how can I use this so that I know rather than pretend to know? And then eventually we might be able to use these AI models to do what writing does today for us, which is to help us think about things. Now, we are far from that.
Yeah.
And I think that nobody under the age of 25 should use an AI model. They need to develop their brains and develop the ability to write until such time as we know how to use AI models to help us to think. But I think that's
good old Plato. He always has something for us. So
Indeed.
That's
Indeed.
great. That's great. Another way I think about it is, again, with students, I would often talk about how if you're using some sort of assistance, getting a essay offline or something like that, it's like going into the weight room and having somebody else lift the weights for you.
Exactly.
You're not going to build the muscle to actually be able to do anything on the field. So that's really great. So anything else we need to add that we just need to tell our dear listeners here before we go forth?
If you want to learn more, look for Aquinas 101
awesome.
At the Thomistic Institute.
Again, I said my mind is blown by this. I'm going to be listening back to this and I'm going to have to unpack and pray about a lot of this. So thank you so much. I knew you were the right person to have this conversation with, and I was right. Yeah. Would you close us in prayer?
Sure thing.
Dear listener, wherever you are, let's take a moment and pray.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Heavenly Father, please open the hearts and the minds of all those who watch this video. Allow them to hear the word that you have to speak to them, so that they may see you and come to know you and come to love you with all their hearts. May the Sacred Heart of Jesus pour mercy and love upon them, that they may give their lives entirely to you and find in our Lord Jesus Christ salvation. And we ask this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Spirit.
Amen. St. Dominic, St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine.
Pray for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you
This
for
has been
having me.
awesome. I just want to give a couple of shout outs. If you loved this episode, please like and subscribe. That helps us on YouTube. It finds other people who like this stuff. The algorithm will show it to them if it showed it to you and you like it. Please, if there's anything we missed or if you have a question, put it down in the comments. We'll try to respond. That would be great as well. If this is like your favorite show and you listen to every episode, then I really would invite you to go to popculturecatechism.com and consider becoming a patron, where you can support me and my family and my ministry and help more awesome episodes like this to happen. And especially I want to thank all our patrons, but especially Tom and Emily Camberiotti, Bob and Lisa Tenney, and Steve and Maggie Hubbard. Thank you so much. And dear listener, thank you for making it to the end here. Thank you for pressing play today. We love you and we'll see you next time. Take care. Do you love the message that you just heard? Would you like to share it with your church community or school? You can bring me as a speaker or musician to your church community. Just go to miketenneymusic.com and there's a little contact form there that you can fill out, or you can send that to the people at your parish, church, school, whatever, and they can invite me that way. And I love online stuff, and if you want to share this episode with people, that's great. But I think we all know that the way that hearts and minds are really changed most of the time is in person, and I love doing in-person talks and parish missions and all that sort of thing. So if you'd like me to come out and speak to your people in person, I would love to do that. Go to miketenneymusic.com.